What up, Hyperchange? Welcome to another episode. Today I want to mix it up, do a book review. Maybe you'll get an idea of a book that you actually want to read. I don't know. Anyway, let's get into it. Just read The Undoing Project. This book was by Michael Lewis. He's one of my favorite authors. He does an incredible job telling stories about people, finance, economics. Some of his books you probably have heard of: Moneyball, The Big Short, The Blind Side. A bunch of these are turned into movies. Flash Boys. Like, he's an incredible author, and I think his best skill is distilling super complex topics into understandable, relatable stories for the average person. First of all, the way I got this book was Uncle Raleigh gifted it to me for Christmas, so shout out Uncle Raleigh, thank you. So it's about these two Israeli psychologists, and the first half of the book, I will admit, is kind of slow and almost lost me because it's very historical, kind of the life story of these two psychologists independently. You don't even really know they're going to meet. I was kind of confused at first. There's like all these names going around. They had a very tumultuous early life. Like, both of them were involved in a lot of wars in Israel. They were in the military. One of them was a paratrooper, I think, jumping out of planes. And so these two psychologists by the name of Danny Kahneman and Amos Tversky went on to collaborate in the mid-1900s. I want to say they started collaborating around the 60s. Everyone who knew them was like, these guys are totally different, like they're both ends of the spectrum. Well, opposites attract, I guess, in this case, because these two psychologists teamed up together and produced some of the most groundbreaking psychological research about the human mind and about decision making and about the systematic errors and biases that we make when we make decisions every day. And then they start getting to the applications of this research in the back half of the book. And one example that I thought was really interesting was like they brought all these doctors in a room that were trying to diagnose a disease by looking at an x-ray. And there were 7 factors that these doctors said they were looking for when they looked at an x-ray. That was like size of this, like inflammation here, whatever these 7 traits were that could be mathematically programmed into an algorithm. And so when they showed they designed this algorithm and then did a test where they showed all the doctors who designed the algorithm a bunch of different x-rays, even the same x-rays twice, and they noticed that the diagnoses from the real doctors were super inconsistent. In fact, even some of the doctors looked at the same x-ray twice and came up with 2 different diagnoses. But the algorithm designed by those doctors did an incredibly better job at predicting the disease or the occurrence of that disease better than all of the doctors. So even though the algorithm was designed by the doctors, it was much better at picking it because all these systematic errors in the human mind led the doctors to not being able to put into practice their own rules and algorithms that they designed. I think I would highly recommend this book, and I think everybody should read it because it'll give you like these little like moments of really good insight about your own intuition and about your own biases. What I'm trying to get to is at the end of the book, basically, I don't want to ruin it all, but they get pretty famous, and they're still really famous now, and basically their research is the groundwork essentially for what is now behavioral economics, which is this fundamental theory that the entire way economics has been done historically, assuming that consumers and individuals are making rational decisions, is wrong. And there are these systematic biases and misjudgments in human character that are leading to all these inefficiencies and irrational decisions being made, and there's a totally new way to look at economics, this behavioral lens. So that gave way to the field of, like, these two dudes scheming up. You see the entire story of the genesis of behavioral economics, which is fascinating and like still being worked into society today. The thoughts that these guys laid out in their papers about decision making and judgment were so far ahead of their time that their potential is fully yet to be realized. And extrapolating this with this whole notion of like now in the future, where does the theory of economics go? Where does behavioral econ go? I've been thinking about like, okay, artificial intelligence, that microcosm of an algorithm is better at diagnosing the diseases than the doctors who designed the algorithm. Is that going to be true for politics in the future? Will an algorithm we develop to make political decisions or economic decisions about when to raise interest rates be better at making those decisions than humans? And if we can prove that it is through fundamentally this research, then that almost makes it seem like algorithms, or aka artificial intelligence, would be better at making decisions than humans are at a grand scale for humans. So in a weird way, I almost think this book is the backbone of the start of research that will eventually prove, or that could be used to prove, that artificial intelligence algorithms are far more efficient at decision making and should be therefore granted the power to make decisions over humans because of this systematic biases and errors we don't have, which is incredibly scary and is like a big piece of the robot revolution that I've been freaking out about. This book could be the beginnings, like Danny Kahneman and Amos Tversky, their research could be the beginnings of proving that humans shouldn't be allowed to make decisions and that algorithms will do a better job. So that is fascinating to me, and I think we're only at the just tip of the iceberg of the impact of these guys' research, and I think artificial intelligence is going to make this so much more relevant and make the Undoing Project so much more relevant. So now that's why I don't want to make this too long a review, but like incredible insights from this book. It really made me rethink things. And on top of that, it's just like a very emotional book about two incredibly smart guys, like definitely a little bit of bromance going on. They were super into each other in terms of like smart, creating this groundbreaking research. So you like really, you feel for these characters. They feel like they're both your friends at the end of the book. Incredibly well written. And I will say, like, I did think the first part was a little bit boring, but I think he had to give you that context to put it all in perspective. And I think that's my own bias. So I'm going to rate every book that I read. I'm going to start doing these videos. I'm giving this a 4 out of 5. Yeah, I know that. Actually, 4.5 out of 5. I'm going to be super tough. I don't really want to give anybody a 5 out of 5 unless it's a mind-blowingly good book. And this book, the first part was a little too slow for me. And like some of the psychological theories were very complicated. And I felt like if you weren't a psychologist or hadn't spent time reading a lot of papers, they kind of just go over your head because it's like all these, there's like, you're reading on one page, like 10 new terms that are, you know, defeating all these old rules and terms that were the norm that you didn't even know existed because you're not in psychology. That part to me made it a little less interesting and harder to read through the beginning, but towards the end, it just heats up and like you'll get so into it. So 4.5 out of 5, mainly because I think this is such an important piece of economics and psychology that is just going to keep unfolding. And these guys' research, even though it was done 30 years ago from today, is going to become more and more relevant into the future, which I think is a crazy way to look at it. And I think that's why everybody should go get a copy of this book. I'm going to put a link in the description. If you guys have books that you want me to review, let me know in the comments. Like, I'm totally open for ideas, business, finance, economics, entrepreneurship, whatever it is. Let's check it out. Anyway, that's Hyperchange. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.